man behind the red door. It was 1998, and Anna had just moved into an old apartment in downtown Curitiba. The building, constructed in the 1940s, exuded an air of mystery with its creaky wooden floors and heavy red-painted doors. Yet, one door at the end of Anna's hallway stood out. Though identical to the others, it seemed different. No one appeared to live there. From her first day, Anna noticed the other tenants avoided discussing that door. When she asked the building manager about it, he looked away, visibly uneasy. That apartment has been empty for years. They say anyone who tries to enter regrets it. But those are just stories, he said, refusing to elaborate. The comment unsettled Anna, but she tried to brush it off. During her first nights in her new home, strange things began to happen. The hallway became inexplicably colder than the rest of the building, and a faint, murmuring sound seemed to echo in the silence. Then, one night, Anna was awakened by a distinct noise. 3 solid knocks. Thump, thump, thump. They were soft but deliberate, coming from the hallway. Summoning her courage, Anna opened her door and peered out. The hallway was empty, but the knocking continued, louder now. It was coming from the red door. Her heart raced as she quickly shut her door, locking it and trying to steady her breath. The noises persisted through the night, as if something inside the abandoned apartment wanted out. Over the following days, the red door seemed to occupy her thoughts, as though it called to her when Anna questioned the other residents. They either avoided her or changed the subject. One elderly neighbor warned her, "Leave it alone. Whatever's in there, don't disturb it." One night, overwhelmed by curiosity and a strange compulsion to uncover the truth, Anna decided to act. Armed with a screwdriver, she approached the door. The air grew heavy, and a piercing chill enveloped her as she neared it. Deep scratches marred the door's surface, as if something or someone had tried to claw their way out. Anna's pulse thundered in her ears, but she pressed on. With effort, she forced the lock. The door creaked open, revealing a pitch-black room. Using her phone's flashlight, she scanned the interior. The sight froze her in place. The room was empty, save for a rocking chair in the center, swaying on its own with a faint creak. The air was thick and suffocating. Before Anna could react, the door slammed shut behind her with a deafening bang. She turned and tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. Then she felt an icy breath on the back of her neck. A heavy, raspy breathing followed. Slowly, Anna turned around. In the corner of the room stood a tall, shadowy figure. Though its face was obscured by darkness, its glowing eyes pierced through the void, fixed on her. Anna tried to scream, but no sound came out. The figure began moving toward her, its steps slow and deliberate. In desperation, Anna pounded on the door, screaming for help. Suddenly, the door flew open, and she stumbled into the hallway. Standing there was the building manager, pale and wide-eyed. "I told you not to open that door," he muttered as he quickly locked it again. Anna left the apartment the next morning and never returned. Years later, she learned from a former resident that decades earlier, a man had been found dead in that apartment. Known for his obsessive and paranoid behavior, he had spied on his neighbors and concocted bizarre theories. Since his death, eerie phenomena and ghostly sightings had plagued the apartment. Anna still dreams of those glowing eyes, staring at her through the dark. Some doors, she realized, are better left unopened. The visitor on the road. Gabriel had been a truck driver for over 15 years and thought he had seen it all on the road. He knew every twist and turn of BR-116, especially the treacherous winding stretch of Serra do Cafezal. It was a cold, rainy night when he decided to make the trip alone, hauling a load of food to São Paulo. The wind shook the truck and visibility was terrible, but Gabriel took pride in his experience. Nothing surprised him, or so he thought. The rain fell heavily, almost hypnotically, when Gabriel noticed a figure on the side of the road. It was a woman in white, completely soaked, waving desperately. He hesitated for a moment, considering his safety, but his instinct won out. He stopped the truck a few meters ahead and rolled down the window. "Miss, are you all right?" he asked. The woman didn't answer immediately. Her face was pale, her eyes glinting strangely, as if lost in another world. After a moment of silence, she nodded and climbed into the cab without a word. Gabriel tried to make conversation to ease the tension. "Where are you headed?" he asked. She finally answered in a barely audible whisper. "To the next rest stop, please." The simplicity of her response did little to diminish the unease Gabriel felt. The air in the cab grew unnaturally cold, and a faint metallic smell began to spread. Gabriel adjusted the air conditioning, but the temperature didn't change. As he drove, Gabriel noticed something was off. Glancing in the rearview mirror, he saw that the seat where the woman sat appeared wet. But it wasn't just rainwater. A dark stain spread slowly, looking like blood. Gabriel's heart raced. He tried to stay calm, but the woman's silence made everything more unnerving. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. She turned her head slowly toward him, revealing a chilling, almost inhuman smile. Her eyes were empty, her skin even paler than before. Gabriel felt his blood run cold. He looked back at the road for a moment, and when he glanced at the mirror again, the seat was empty. The woman had vanished. He slammed on the brakes and stepped out to check. The rain poured down, but there was no sign of anyone on the roadside. Gabriel looked back at the seat. The dark stain remained, but there was no logical explanation for her disappearance. He returned to the cab, trying to rationalize what had just happened. Perhaps it was exhaustion or an illusion caused by the rain. When he finally reached the next rest stop, Gabriel entered the restaurant to gather his thoughts. He shared the story with other truckers, hoping they would laugh and dismiss it. Instead, one older man with a grave expression replied, "You met the bride of the Serra. Many have seen her. They say she died in an accident on her wedding day, trying to return home. Since then, she appears to drivers on rainy nights, asking for help." Gabriel didn't respond. The idea of encountering a ghost left him shaken, but he couldn't ignore what he had seen. The older man continued, "Be thankful she left. Some aren't so lucky." The rest of the trip was a mental ordeal. Gabriel couldn't stop thinking about the woman. Every shadow on the road made his heart race. When he finally delivered his cargo, he returned home as quickly as possible, avoiding further stops. He avoided the Serra do Cafezal route for months, but the memory of that night lingered. Years later, passing by a small cemetery near the road, he saw something that made him stop his truck. It was a simple gravestone with a photo of a young woman in a wedding dress. Gabriel recognized her instantly. The same pale face, the same vacant eyes. Since then, he avoids driving at night, especially in the rain. Even during the day, he sometimes feels as though he's being watched. And on stormy nights, he wakes abruptly, swearing he hears a distant whisper calling his name. The sound from the basement. Sofia grew up in an old house in Ouro Preto, Minas Gerais. The home had been in her family for generations and was filled with stories that blended nostalgia and mystery. The stone walls, solid wood furniture, and stained glass windows gave the house a charming appearance. But something about it unsettled Sofia from a young age. The basement. Her parents always kept the basement locked, claiming it was merely a storage space filled with old and dangerous things, with rotting boards and cobwebs. "There's nothing for you to see down there," her mother would say, whenever Sofia asked. Yet, something about that place seemed to call her, as if it held a buried secret waiting to be uncovered. When Sofia turned 16, her parents decided to spend a weekend away, leaving her home alone for the first time. She loved the idea of having the house to herself and spent the day listening to music and exploring old photo albums. That night, as silence enveloped the house, Sofia heard something that made her heart skip a beat. A low, unmistakable sound coming from the basement. It was the dragging of something heavy, followed by a faint creaking noise. She froze, convincing herself it was just the usual sounds of an old house. But when the noise repeated, Sofia couldn't ignore it. Grabbing a flashlight, she made her way to the basement door. The door, always locked, now appeared slightly ajar. A chill ran down her spine, but curiosity got the better of her. Pushing the door open cautiously, Sofia was met with a damp, metallic smell. The staircase leading down seemed longer than she remembered, disappearing into darkness. Descending carefully, the flashlight trembled in her hands, casting shadows on the moldy walls. At the bottom, the basement felt larger than it should have been, as if the space had stretched beyond the house's foundations. In the center of the room was an old wooden chest. It was ancient, with rusted metal fittings and deep scratches across its surface. The sound she had heard seemed to have come from there. Sofia hesitated but felt an irresistible urge to know what lay inside. Slowly, she opened the chest, its creaking hinges echoing through the empty room. What she found made her blood run cold. Inside were old photographs of her family, but they were strange. Some depicted parties and family events, while others were deeply unsettling. Relatives lying down with expressions that were almost lifeless, as though they were dead. In every photo, in the background, was a shadowy figure, a tall man with an indistinct face, always standing silently, watching. Suddenly, the basement door slammed shut, plunging Sofia into darkness. She raced to the stairs, but the door wouldn't budge. Behind her, she heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate steps echoing through the basement. Turning around, she saw the man from the photos emerging from the shadows. He seemed to materialize from the darkness itself, towering and menacing, his eyes glowing a faint red. Sofia screamed, but her voice seemed swallowed by the air around her. The man moved closer, each step bringing a wave of icy cold that made her breath visible in the dim light. Desperate, she ran deeper into the basement, tripping over her own feet. When she looked back, he had stopped but stood by the chest, as though guarding its contents. She closed her eyes and began to pray, something she hadn't done in years. When she opened her eyes, the man was gone, and the basement door was wide open. Sophia didn't hesitate. She bolted up the stairs and locked the door behind her. She spent the rest of the night awake, with every light in the house on, waiting for her parents to return. When they finally came back, Sophia recounted what had happened. She expected them to laugh or dismiss her story as an overactive imagination. But instead, her parents exchanged worried glances. Her mother took her hands and said, "You should never have gone into the basement. There are things in this house we can't explain, and some of them don't want to be disturbed." The family moved out later that week. They never returned, and Sophia grew up without fully understanding what had happened that night. Yet, sometimes in her dreams, she still sees the man from the basement standing in the shadows, silently watching, waiting